of pain. And the way I like to conceptualize this is something that I've heard in different places that I think is a very effective metaphor. So I like to think of this threat bucket or stress bucket. So imagine you have a metaphorical bucket, and inside of it you're holding all the different stressors and challenges that you experience. And once it reaches a certain threshold, there's a faucet, and the output is going to be pain. And so things like tissue damage and injury certainly can go into the bucket, but so can things like disrupted sleep or inflammation caused by drinking alcohol or foods to which you have a sensitivity and reaction. Right? Sometimes people are like, "Gosh, I ate balsamic vinegar and now I have joint pain," or whatever it might be, or I ate, whatever it is. So there's also psychological relationship stress, work stress, things like that. There's also their physical load. Are they moving in a way where they're actually aggravating and putting force through that compromised area or not? So there's, a lot of movement patterns have to do with it. And then also, of course, the overall stress bucket, right? That's a huge, huge part of it. There's so many factors that go into it with back pain, but it's really, really interesting. There often is a mechanical issue, and then there's also the interplay of the mechanical issue with all these biopsychosocial factors.
Yeah, you can't separate the brain from or the person themselves, who they are, from the mechanics itself. I think we want to put everything conveniently into buckets. How, how do we screen for these in practice? And, obviously, how does your product newbie change the equation for some of this situations that people are stuck in, a cascade of injuries?
There's a few pieces to this. When we're talking specifically about low back pain, there often is one or more mechanical flaws. Like there's great research looking at deficits in multifidus activity, which is the one of the innermost spinal muscles that it has a lot of sensors, a lot of sensory receptors inside of it that's monitoring the spine. You're going to spend the time and money and effort to go there. I would like to get some tangible result each time I go. And I don't think that is a standard that is generally requested or required or expected in many places. And the ones that we work with are holding themselves to a higher standard. And I think that expectation of the progress and the rate of progress is a big deal too.
Yeah, I have a personal example about that situation. My daughter is a dancer, and she's dealt with typical dancers' injuries. And I've always had to bite my tongue, and I finally found the right therapist that is, you know, not only just treating the pain, but actually looking at the movement mechanics and actually, because you don't get both. You get the clinician that follows standard protocol, bands, med ball, and selectorized piece of equipment, sets and reps of approach. Not wrong. I'm not knocking it. Lived it and practice it still. Like, this is pain is a contextual thing that we talked about here. So we should be doing things differently, or should be an ongoing evolution of clinical workflow. But also for, let's take this to a different environment, like for a coach or a personal trainer that's hearing right now, what do they do differently on a Monday morning based on what we've covered?
One area that I think would be worth focusing on, and they may already be doing this, but one is having more of a lifestyle inventory with your personal training client, is understanding some of these mechanisms of pain, biopsychosocial model of pain, the threat bucket or the stress bucket, and understanding how the different stresses that they're experiencing outside of their, outside of those training sessions, outside the gym, could be related to pain. I don't want to say that I'm encouraging, personal trainers to diagnose pain by any means or work outside their scope of practice, because I do think there's times where you need to be able to recognize there's pain, there's a problem here, and we need to refer out and have a trusted. And maybe that's one takeaway too, is to establish relationships with local physical therapists, chiropractors that you can collaborate with, because they're not going to train people for the long term after their plan of care is over. They'll send them back to you, but if that person is injured or in pain, they're not going to be a long term client either, right? So there's a good long term. We can all act in enlightened self interest and still refer out and still do things that are best for the patient and still in the best interest of your business too. We don't want to just necessarily hold on to everybody and be like, oh, if I let them go somewhere else, I'm never going to get them back.
As cliche and as this is probably going to label me. People will be like, "Oh, you're a softie, huh?" When I trained clients, I used to use the I'm a Star Wars geek.